It is a place of soaring granite cathedrals, countless breathtaking falls, and the incomparable valley called Yosemite. It is one of our most accessible and popular parks, but still full of exotic secrets. Elusive creatures and ornery youngsters. Here, the earthbound take flight, terrorize the tiny, and do battle with each other. They raise greedy children among a cast of marvelous characters. And one of the world's largest and oldest living things in the timeless stone crucible of Yosemite National Park. In the ancient tales, the fog and the wind are both twins and opposites. Powerful spirits embodied in two clever hunters. The elusive eagle-eyed bobcat and the clever, tricky coyote. It's best not to be small and delicious on this wild stage, because these spirits are hungry, poised, and coiled for the killer's ballet. For a predator in Yosemite, it helps to know how to fly. Though perfect terrain for the bobcat and the coyote, the Sierra Nevada mountains must have been a heart-stopping sight and a daunting barrier for those first Europeans headed westward into California. But from the time they breached these stone ramparts and discovered the magical Yosemite Valley, this place has cast a spell over artists, writers, scientists, and pioneers with more nerve than sense. These magnificent vistas sparked the very idea of national parks. Stunned by its beauty, awed by its giant sequoias, a new breed of activists fought to protect Yosemite from development. And in 1864, President Lincoln signed a bill to keep the place wild forever. The last days of winter are tough on many animals in the park, some of whom are literally on their last legs and starving. Coyotes often reap this sad harvest, sniffing out the carcasses of those who didn't make it till spring. There's zero chance of eating in peace here, though. Ravens are bad enough. But this bird is a real recipe for indigestion. The golden eagle. Perhaps it's best to take a nice cut of meat somewhere quieter. But when the eagle spots his chance, the coyote won't tolerate it and an extraordinary battle begins. The eagle has a terrifying 7-foot wingspan. And look out for those 3-inch talons. They can dispatch a deer or a dog. But the coyote has the weight advantage and finally prevails. But not for long. The cawing Greek chorus will eventually get their share. The snows of winter evaporate into the mists of spring. And the shadowy bobcat emerges, with an apprentice killer in tow. Mother is an old hand at this. The kitten mirrors her every move. The huntress demonstrates the finer points. Watch for the tiniest tremor. Listen for the slightest scritching. And pounce. That the voles sometimes get away is part of the education. If at first you don't succeed, try again. There you go. Mom's kill leads to a rousing game of keep away. This sharpens the youngster's ability to chase. And while her kitten eats, perhaps Mom will find her own lunch. But no, there's another kitten waiting in the wings. And the merry-go-round starts all over again. Kids. Sometimes it seems like they'll never leave home. Yosemite sprawls across 1,000 square miles of the Sierra Nevada mountain range. These massive granite formations were born in the molten depths of the earth, cooling slowly to become bulletproof stone. Shoved upward by immense geological forces, the rock was then sculpted and scoured by glaciers, often polished to perfection. The resulting landscape and skyline are almost surreal. The treacherous Tenaya Canyon leads directly up to the most famous icon of the park, the Half Dome. This chiseled crest rises almost a mile above the valley floor. On the other side of the valley, the dizzying vertical thrust of El Capitan is equally unmistakable. From a nearby slope, a tentative nose emerges, followed by its owner, one very groggy black bear. She hasn't seen the light of day in months, and she's asleep on her feet. There's never a coffee shop around when you need one. And she's not alone. In fact, she's got twins, though not identical. Black bears actually come in a whole palette of colors, from brunette to ginger to blonde. Mom looks like she could have used a snooze button. But her young, born months ago in the dark, clearly have cabin fever. Now they can wrestle in the sun, surrounded by new sights, smells, and endless possibilities. Mom, famished, kickstarts her dormant guts with anything remotely edible. Never having seen a tree, the cubs scrabble up, born to climb. But that's plenty high enough for a first-timer. And back on the ground, there's comfort waiting, and milk as intoxicating as anything in this bright, brave new world. In the spring, snowmelt hurtles downward everywhere in the park. Yosemite Falls cascades 800 yards in 3 stages, the tallest fall in North America. Vernal Fall, at over 300 feet, was called Yanopah, or Little Cloud, by the native people. Bridal Veil Fall often wafts in the breeze, as its namesake would. There's water, water everywhere, calling out that it's time to create new life. Now, in the lower elevations of the park, colorful Sierra newts begin to march resolutely toward the waters where they hatched. Their brilliant orange bellies serve as a warning to anything that might find them a tempting mouthful. Their skin excretes a toxin 1,000 times as powerful as cyanide. They spend most of their lives on land, but now it's time to mate. And to do that, like most amphibians, they must become water dwellers once again. Males outnumber females, so courtships quickly degenerate into free-for-alls. And they just keep coming. There seems to be quite a bit of gender confusion in the melee. And most spend more time mud wrestling than mating. Soon, the nearby twigs are festooned with translucent packets of eggs. Little newt tadpoles will emerge from these come summer. Yosemite's crystal clear streams and rivers provide shelter for many little beings in spring, but not always protection. Hungry belted kingfishers have their eyes peeled for prey. Gotcha. But this fish is a wriggling, uncooperative mouthful. Fortunately, the stocky little kingfishers have powerful necks. Ranging from an altitude of just 1,800 feet to over 13,000, Yosemite's changing terrain hosts countless ecosystems. In the woodlands where the bobcat lurks, western gray squirrels need to be vigilant. The rodents are not picky eaters and feed on nuts, berries, and tree seeds, but are happy to add insects, frogs, and birds' eggs. They, in turn, are staples on the bobcat menu. The gray squirrel has that feeling of being watched. The perfectly camouflaged cat picks her moment very carefully. The cat is just as agile in the trees as on the ground. But the squirrel is lightning fast. There are plenty of squirrels in these woods, as the cat well knows. And there's another, a Douglas squirrel or pine squirrel. True to his name, he's methodically munching a pine cone, as we would strip a nice bit of corn on the cob. The bobcat squeaks to herself in intense anticipation. She slinks into position. And they're off. This time, she comes up with the goods. The bobcat eats the entire squirrel head first, leaving hardly anything behind. She's done her good deed for today. Without predators like her, the park would quickly be overrun with rodents. The gorgeous Yosemite Valley awakes. First cut by the Merced River, its contours were then rounded by waves of enormous glaciers. Fog rolls along the valley, as elusive as its spirit animal, the bobcat. Set against Yosemite's breathtaking granite backdrop are hundreds of square miles of forests. Among them, 3 groves of ancient and impossibly tall giants stand out. Sequoias are among the largest and oldest living things on Earth. They can reach heights of almost 300 feet. That's a 30-story skyscraper. The higher up the tree, the greater the cone production. A single tree can generate 400,000 seeds per year. But just 1 in a million will take root and begin its vertical journey. The Sequoias in Mariposa Grove are the most popular. Tourists can't resist the California tunnel tree, dug out in 1895, before anyone knew this would damage the trees. The grove is home to roughly 500 fully grown giants. Their ages defy belief. These giant roots belong to the fallen monarch, still intact centuries after the tree toppled. It's estimated that the grizzly giant was a seedling centuries before the birth of Christ. It's one of the largest trees in the world. Far from the tourist attractions, our bobcat boy sniffs markings left by other cats. His mother and sister are enjoying a mutual sunbath. Like all cats, they'll spend up to half their waking hours cleaning themselves and each other. Having caught up on the latest chemical gossip, Brother decides he could use a little affection as well. The family is the picture of feline contentment until something catches their attention. An adolescent black bear has suddenly arrived, who doesn't know quite what to make of the cats. The bobcat mother doesn't even give the bear a second thought. Cats and bears pretty much ignore one another. And Brother finally gets his bath. The skinny young bear decides to look for something more edible. The Merced River is full of good things to eat. And here's a dead trout, the pride and joy of the signal crayfish. The bear smells the ripening fish immediately. The crayfish tugs possessively at his prize. But it's hardly a fair fight. The naturalist John Muir, founder of the Sierra Club and the leader of the fight to protect the park, said of Yosemite, "It is by far the grandest of all the special temples of nature I was ever permitted to enter." Yosemite's granite facades are heaven for rock-breeding birds like these common ravens. But the chicks are dangerously exposed. And there's trouble overhead. A keen-eyed adolescent bald eagle. But here comes Father to the rescue, nose diving straight at the much bigger eagle. Fearless, he harasses the predator, even plucking its tail feathers and saving the day. Father wheels above El Capitan, maintaining his defensive air patrol. Mother, meanwhile, arrives home with a beak full of food for her insatiable brood. The place is precarious enough for creatures with wings. But the flightless love this rock face too. El Cap, as they call it, is coveted by climbers the world over. The 3,000-foot monolith takes 4 or 5 days to climb. Yosemite's sheer walls, towers, and spires offer climbers every imaginable degree of difficulty, from hair-raising to flat-out insane. It's as if the waves of glaciation over time carved this place with daredevils in mind, with incomparable vistas as their rewards. The heights of Yosemite are not just breathtaking and intimidating. They're home to a very special creature, the American pika, a living stuffed animal. This tiny cousin of the rabbit lives in boulder fields above the tree line, frenetically storing food supplies, cushioning their homes, eating, and just being preposterously cute. Sadly, the pika is in grave danger. It's so heat sensitive it can die when temperatures reach just over 75 degrees Fahrenheit. And as the climate gets warmer, the pikas must move higher in the park or perish. They've moved 500 feet higher in the last decade. And up here, they're more exposed to predators from above, like the voracious golden eagle. The sight of the bird of prey sets off alarms and a hasty retreat into the pika's rocky fortresses. But the golden eagle is a minor threat for these adorable creatures compared to global warming. Pikas have already disappeared from much of their range. High summer is approaching now, and Yosemite is awash in color. The mule deer bucks are regrowing their antlers, which they shed each winter. Many of the does now have fawns, usually twins. The little Bambis will stay with their mother until the next spring. Till then, they live with a few other does and their fawns in small herds. They'll be weaned in a few weeks, so it's best to drink up now. The white patches on their backs generally disappear after their first month. In June, tufted poppies and other meadow plants bloom profusely. It's an insect's paradise. And the Sierra Nevada yellow-legged frogs are big fans of insects. This incredibly rare species lives in a tiny area around Yosemite at an altitude of about 6,000 feet. While frogs around the world are being wiped out by a fungal disease, some groups of these guys are healthy, hungry and athletic little predators with quite deadly tongues. It's July, high summer in Yosemite. Our kittens are almost as big as their mother now. At 4 months old, they're looking quite well fed and self-satisfied. Mom checks in on them all the time. The siblings are quite affectionate with one another, but one day in the future, they'll go their separate ways. Bobcats are extremely adaptable and flourish throughout North America. Some estimate that there may be 1 million of them in the U.S. The fact that they're so rarely seen is a testament to their shy and solitary habits. Just like domestic cats, they bump heads as a form of bonding. More than that, they're marking each other with scent glands in their faces. Week by week, the kittens are becoming ever more independent. Yosemite has so many ecosystems. It's easy for animals to end up in unlikely places. A young mule deer has wandered up into the Rocky Heights and catches the attention of Yosemite's so-called whistle pigs. Yellow-bellied marmots are inquisitive and often completely unafraid of humans. One of the largest of the park's rodents, they're quite agile on the rocks most of the time. These high country critters only come out to play during the summer. They spend the rest of the year underground, much of it hibernating. Their young leave the burrow for the first time when they're around 3 weeks old, under the watchful eyes of their mothers. Generally, a male will have a harem of 2 or 3 females, and everybody's on the lookout for trouble. After his short excursion to the marmot colony, the male deer heads back to the lower areas of the park. Perhaps not the best idea. Down in the valley, black bears patrol. They usually avoid one another except during the mating season. But here comes a hungry youngster. This black bear is actually blonde and rather shabby. He's on the lookout for a nice, dead, rotting tree. Because under the bark hide some of his favorite things. Lovely, yummy ants. Even better, eggs and grubs. These are little bags of protein, just what a growing bear needs. But it's a meal that fights back. Ants bite and spray nasty formic acid that burns sensitive noses. Finally, the swarm gets the better of the bear. In summer, another swarm descends on Yosemite. Tourists, 3.5 million annually. Unfortunately, tourists, high temperatures, and California's drought can be a combustible combination. Forest fires are frighteningly common in the High Sierra, but the rim fire in the fall of 2013 was one for the history books. Started by a hunter's illegal campfire in a neighboring reserve, it burned out of control for 10 weeks, destroying 250,000 acres. It wasn't declared fully out till more than a year later. Some parts of the Sierra Nevada smoldered through the following autumn. The Rim Fire was the third largest forest fire ever recorded in California. But fire is not always a tragedy. After a ground forest fire, the burnt and blackened landscape is in fact covered in mineral and nutrient-rich ash. Some plants actually need fire to reproduce. The seeds of the giant sequoia, in particular, require heat to germinate. And older giant sequoias have thick, fire-resistant bark. They may survive hundreds of fires in their long lives. The white-headed woodpecker seems not at all dismayed that his home is a little charred. Mother and father take turns feeding the chicks' gaping mouths and removing what comes out the other end. Yosemite is as resilient as it is beautiful. It will survive many a fleeting fire in the future. Its granite cauldron impervious and ageless. By September, it's time for the yellow-bellied marmots to prepare for the big sleep. Since they'll be underground for 8 months, they're diligent about making sure their burrows will be extra comfy. Some are more diligent than others. Marmots love to sunbathe. They had better make hay while the sun shines. Because autumn has come to Yosemite. The mists and the slanting light tell of leaner times to come. The social and affectionate coyotes make the most of their time in the sun. Usually they live in tight-knit nuclear families, with the adults doting on the youngsters. And they're very vocal canines, keeping up a constant chatter of yips, yelps, whines, and howls. Their Latin name actually means barking dog. Coyotes are often mistaken for wolves, but wolves have long been extinct in California and never really took up residence in Yosemite, so the coyotes are top dog here. For now, they hunt alone, going after little rodents, though they may team up to bring down bigger prey, even young or injured deer. The colors are starting to turn, and the mule deer grow restless. The rut is on the horizon. Hormones make everyone a little boisterous, male and female, young and old. The mother bobcat now strays further and further from her kittens, who are becoming fairly self-sufficient, though still close pals. The kittens don't know it yet, but their carefree days are numbered. Fall is coming, and they're in for a rude surprise. These bobcat kittens need to become self-sufficient little killers. The cruel realities of late autumn will soon arrive, and Mother is growing less attentive to their needs and more concerned with her own. Mother will leave them more and more often to fend for themselves. Now the heights of Yosemite are capped with white, and damp, bone-chilling mist rolls through the valleys, turning to snow. Though all of Yosemite has been shaped and polished by glaciers, the great flows of ice have long retreated to the very highest tips of the park, on Mount Lyell and Mount McClure at around 13,000 feet. For coyotes, winter is the season when love is in the air. Coyotes are monogamous, so finding the right chemistry is vital. The male patiently trails after the female until she's ready. And she's not exactly coy. A twitch of the tail to one side, and he's got his answer. Coyote pregnancies last 2 months, and at the end of winter, she'll give birth to 6 or so pups. And he'll be a doting family man. Our bobcat mother, on the other hand, gets to spend more time on her own and seems to be making the most of her newfound freedom. She may wait for a few more months to mate, have her way with several males, and raise her kittens alone in the glories of spring. In the shadow of the living giants of the park. Where the alchemy of rock and water has carved the matchless, immense cradle of Yosemite National Park.